Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on scenario planning. We'll just give it a bit more time to see if anybody else joins. Right, looks like we've got a good bunch of people joining, so we'll make a start. So, as I said, welcome to our webinar on scenario planning in Anaplan. Just a quick introduction to and a flavour for today's journey. So, we will take you for a quick overview of Anaplan and Bedford. Before diving into an Anaplan demonstration. The demonstration will really look to showcase the speed and agility of Anaplan for running a number of different scenarios, what ifs, if you wish, for your business. We'll look to articulate the impacts of these decisions on your business, and we'll move different divisions in the business, these planning functions and we'll showcase that from a demand point of view, a supply, feeding into workforce, and ultimately feeding into a cash position for your business. And we'll really focus on the speed at which we can make decisions in Anaplan, the trust in the data that Anaplan gives you, and ultimately making sure that you're using your latest business intelligence and applying it to your data at the right time to make the right decisions for your organization. Taking you through the demonstration will be Chris Monette, and you can see his picture on the screen there, and I'll do a quick introduction. My name's Adam Hill, and I'm responsible for business development. I assure you both of those pictures were pre-lockdown. I think lockdown hasn't treated certainly myself very well when I look back at that image. So what is Anaplan? And we'll just do a quick overview of Anaplan. So Anaplan is we're a cloud-based connected planning platform, and very much designed to help organisations accelerate decision making by connecting their data, their people, their plans across the business. Founded in 2006, they've gone through significant growth to where they are today. Some of the key pull-outs from this slide are 1,400 plus customers across 46 countries, 1,200 employees, a partner ecosystem of 175 partners, which Bedford, and I'll touch on ourselves in a bit more detail, are one of, and listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So why Anaplan? Why do people use Anaplan, and what are the advantages it gives back? Fundamentally, it's giving you time to make the right decisions at the right time, and being educated on where you spend your time. We want to remove clever, smart people that are operating from doing manual data entry, from doing the more mundane tasks. So you can apply that knowledge to the analysis and the planning that's required for your business. So using the right skill sets in the right space. It gives you scale as well. We ultimately want your business to be able to scale, to do what if scenarios, to adapt with change, to move hierarchies around. That's all done across the platform, and all of that. And whilst we're doing all of that, we really want to get across that you can trust the data, that you know where that data is coming from. You can trust that it's not been manipulated or changed without knowledge, and that integrity across that data set remains throughout. As I said, that change can be made very quickly. So those what if scenarios, so let's look at this a different way. What would happen if we acquired a company? What would happen if we moved manufacture to a different region? Those type of things. And fundamentally, we want to get rid of the errors that we all see across our Excel spreadsheets, whether that's people working on out-of-date versions, emailing them across, lookups not working when they're transferred from one person to another. So it's really that trust in the data and the speed in which we can move through and make decisions. And as I said, we're a platform. So on our platform, you can develop a number of different scenarios, and we refer to this as a honeycomb. Chris is going to take you through a few areas of a honeycomb. What you can see up on the screen now is our 18 core honeycomb, but there's lots of use cases that can be developed on the platform. And it's a platform owned by the business. It's for the business to develop and move through. We see a number of companies will come in and they will land in one of these honeycombs and then look to expand across. But what by expanding your Anaplan platform, by doing more use cases on the platform, you start to see the ripple effect of the decisions across the business, which Chris will go into more detail and highlight far better than I can introduce over this as well. But fundamentally, we want to show you those impacts across your business and start having the business all working as a collaborative team rather than in a siloed passing of information from one silo to another. And then just on Bedford ourselves, so Chris and myself both work for Bedford Consulting. We're a Gold status Anaplan partner. We're the oldest and largest solely focused Anaplan partner. We've got over 150 customers, which we're incredibly proud of. We have a large team of Anaplan experts, over 40 experts in the business. We've done over 300 implementations, and the key thing there is that's across 40 different plus use cases. So we've got a great breadth of knowledge across industry, across vertical. So we're more than in a great position to help your company on your Anaplan journey. And we've been Partner of the Year for the last 5 years running as well. That's kind of it from my side as a quick introduction. Let's get to the main event, which is Chris taking us through the platform. So I'll hand over to Chris. He can do a quick introduction to himself, and we'll get excited about scenario planning in Anaplan.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. Let me just change my screen first. Okay, so hopefully that'll be appearing. So yeah, my name is Chris Manette. I'm a solutions consultant at Bedford. So helping out with demonstrations, understanding requirements, obviously tailoring kind of proof of concepts and things to help you understand the benefit that Anaplan can bring. The plan for the next 30 minutes or so on the webinar is to walk through an example of planning across these connected use cases that you can see on your screen. We're going to start off with the demand side, planning units down to a SKU level, importantly seeing how this works across multiple scenarios. So that could be something like planning an expected case versus a best case and a worst case in terms of volume. It could be that you want to run a new scenario for a specific event or a key question that's been asked. So we're going to go through that, and we're going to see then how those demand plans across those different scenarios can flow through to the supplier side. So in this case, specifically looking at managing inventory, when we should be raising purchase orders to receive what could be finished goods or the raw materials in time to cope with that demand. We'll then move on to see how that demand also feeds through into a workforce plan. So how we can actually fill that demand for labour across different roles. Could be by hiring more people, by using temporary or agency staff. We'll see that side as well. And then finally, how will those flow through into a cash flow. Importantly, although I'm going to be stepping through kind of multiple roles in the demonstration, Anaplan is completely cloud-based. Security applies to each user. So this will most likely be a devolved planning process with a different person feeding in each step of the plan across those scenarios that we're going to be looking at. If you have any questions as I go through, you should have a questions panel in the GoToWebinar pane, or just use the chat window as well. And I'll try and cover them as we go through the webinar. Otherwise, we'll certainly address them as a follow-up as well. Okay, so let's start with the demand planner forecast. I actually want to begin with a very quick intro just to some of the core concepts of Anaplan, just for those who aren't familiar before we start looking at the data itself. All end users of Anaplan will spend their time in dashboards like these. They're not only used for reporting and analysis, they're also used for data entry. So the idea is that each user could have their own tailored dashboard just for their area of business, or ideally you have the same dashboard being used across multiple people, all filtered down for the security. So they log in, they see the same dashboard, but just filtered down for their area, their KPIs, their drivers is relevant for them. The thing that allows for that, and the thing that gives the biggest difference over something like Excel, is the fact that Anaplan is what we call multi-dimensional, if you've heard of that term. So if I look at my dashboard at the top here, in this case, I have products down into product types, down into individual SKUs, as what we call a dimension here in Anaplan. So I can flip through, switch to a different SKU, for example, and the whole dashboard will update for that SKU. If I go up to a clubs level, this is a golf club example, then we'll see the dashboard aggregated up to the total for clubs, same way I can see it for all products. So rather than having the same version of this dashboard repeated like you have in Excel, so the same version on the multiple tabs just to cover off different products, here in Anaplan, we build it once, and then you just choose the slice of data that you want to view. As I said before, security will then filter which products, in this case, a user sees. As we move through the demonstration, you'll see that we have different dimensions in use. So when we get to the supply side, we might have a dimension that's across the distribution centers. When we get down to workforce, we have a dimension that's the different roles that we can plan against. One of them that's consistent throughout the entire model, though, is the idea of these scenarios. So you'll see here I've got my actuals. So they come in potentially from a source system. Anaplan's agnostic when it comes to the data it brings in. We've linked to hundreds and hundreds of systems, be it things like data warehouses you might have, or ERP systems, GL systems, HR, CRM, you name it, or good old Excel. We get the actuals in, and then it's about how we layer on assumptions, manual input to get to our plans. And in this case, we're working across 3 different scenarios that we're going to plan here. And also you'll see more of this as we build it up as we go through the demonstration. In terms of actually now moving on to the demand planning piece itself and what we're looking at here. So we have our actuals, as I mentioned. So it's been brought in from our ERP system. And here we're looking just to give the demand planner a baseline to start with. In this case, we're actually using a statistical forecast. And if I just flip into a different dashboard here, just to quickly show how that's built up. Anaplan built into the models has about 25 or 30 different pre-built statistical forecasting methods. And what it can do is by loading in your history, ideally 2 years, maybe 3 years worth of history, it can look at that history and automatically pick the best statistical forecasting method for that particular product. If you wanted to run it across products and SKUs or by regions as well, it will take that individual combination of data and pick the relevant method that's best used. So you haven't got to worry about understanding data science and statistical forecasting. Anaplan will pick that best fit for you. And you can see here across my SKUs, some of the different methods that have been picked. We haven't got time today to go into detail on this, but effectively what we're then doing is taking that statistical forecast that's been done for us and using that as our baseline, rather than just saying, take last year's data and add 2% to it, for example. What we then have, if I just switch my filter here and just look at the planning weeks versus the full year, is that statistical forecast that's been done for us. As a demand planner, we're then going to adjust. So in this case, we're looking at scenario 1. So perhaps this is the expected case and seeing how we can layer on adjustments to that baseline data. In this particular case, we have the idea of kind of time-based assumptions. So here I've got things like a fall in demand due to lockdown, just keeping it topical. So in this case, we've got perhaps a 20% fall in demand between a certain set of weeks. If I choose to actually include this in my scenario, you can see the impact that it's having up here versus the baseline that we started with. And if I just tick a few more of these on, you'll see at a high level, we're basically making changes to our baseline data by layering on these assumptions. So very detailed, the demand planner can go in for a specific date range, pick a percentage. If they want to change this to 25%, for example, they can just key into these cells, add any commentary they want to as well, just to add that human interaction element as they build up their demand plan. Alternatively, of course, as it's similar to an Excel template, you can just go in and just start typing in numbers as well. So I can come in and do various uplifts or decreases to my demand based on any experience I have of that particular product, marketing campaigns, things I know are going on, to do my adjustments to that baseline that I started with. Importantly, every single change that's made in Anaplan is tracked. So if I want to see the history of a certain cell, I can go back and see exactly who changed it, when they changed it, and what they changed it to as well. Or obviously you have the commentary fields as well, either on a cell by cell level, or in this case against a particular change, or an overall dashboard level as well that you can put in your own human commentary as you make these changes. So the idea is you step through the demand planner will go through for however long you want to go out, and the plan is completely flexible when it comes to time. If you want to go down to days, weeks, months, years, however far you want to go in the future as well. If you want to do just to the end of the current year, or do a 2-year plan, 5-year, 10-year, it's up to you how far out you go. But the demand planner will go through, layer in their assumptions. In this case, I'm doing it for an expected case. But then very easily, again, if we flip back to our dimensions here at the top, we can see the idea of doing that same logic, but for a different scenario. So if I change to my scenario 2, for example, perhaps I want to do a worst case scenario that I want to plan for. As we start, we have the data that I started with. In Anaplan, we actually have the idea of what we call a bulk copy. So this, if I jump into the model builder side, this allows me to take all of the data from one place and copy it all at once to the other. So in my case, what I want to do is look at my versions. And you can see here again those same list of different scenarios, scenario 1, 2, and 3. I just entered my assumptions into scenario 1. And if I want to, I can do a copy and say, take everything from scenario 1 and copy it into scenario 2 as a starting point. So what this is going to do is take every single assumption, every unit, every manual entry that I've done from scenario 1 and copy it into scenario 2. And in this case, I'm actually going to do the same to scenario 3 as well, because I know I want to do a best case and a worst case alongside my expected case. You'll see how quick that is to copy. And if I jump back now into the end user experience and refresh this, what we have is a situation where scenario 2 and scenario 3 are identical to my scenario 1 forecast that I did as a starting point. So very quick to get to a snapshot or an as-is position. It's also something that you might use if you're snapshotting different scenarios at different stages of approval. So once it gets submitted to the board, maybe you do a snapshot and that version doesn't change. In my case though, I am going to change these scenarios. So in my worst case, I might come in and say, well, actually, what if a drop off of 25? What if it's actually a drop off of 30%? What if this one is lower and we drop down by 10? Maybe our promotion doesn't actually have the effect you want it to. So I'll just take this one out of the scenario completely. And then maybe our end of year spike we were hoping for, maybe is only a 5% spike as well. And so you can see how quick it is to do some adjustments. I could also take out these manual ones here, but all these changes are only being applied to my second scenario. If I flip back to scenario 1, you'll see we have all that existing data still maintained there. Just quickly, if I flip into scenario 3 to make my best case, perhaps lockdown doesn't have the drop-off we expected. If anything, perhaps maybe we put an increase in here. Maybe our promotion does really well. Bank holiday sales are higher than expected. Perhaps I just take this one out as well. So whatever those things are that you're planning for, whatever that knowledge you have of your products, your customers, that's what you can feed into, and you can feed it in across these different scenarios. So something that's typically very hard to do in Excel is to take a plan that's been done down to a low level in one instance, and then do a full what if, changing a few drivers, but keeping that consistency through the plan. So for example, now, rather than just being on one dashboard, if I move through into another one, all of that data instantly flows through the Anaplan model. And you'll see as we keep going down through to the supply chain, through to workforce, as I make these changes, those numbers are instantly being updated all the way through the model. Where we get to now is the idea of seeing these scenarios side by side. So firstly, I can see the baseline, and I'll see the baseline is the same across all three. It's our 258. If I click this and we can view the chart here, we have the same baseline across all three scenarios. But what's now different is the adjustments. And here, using kind of the context-specific analysis that we can do in Anaplan, just by clicking around the dashboard to see how things update, we can do comparisons of our adjustments themselves or of the total forecast. And we can start to do some analysis of comparing these different scenarios and the effect they'll have as well. All the dashboards, I should say, and to be fair, the logic as well, is all configured based on your requirements. We have a whole set of pre-built applications. So if there's a new use case you want to try, or you just want some inspiration or some best practice, there's apps you can download and start to play around with. But generally speaking, it'd be a case if you have your own requirements that you want to do, a certain type of analysis you want to do, or KPIs you want to compare across these scenarios, that would be built with you, and you would then take ownership of that moving forwards. Okay, so in terms of the demand side at a SKU level, I'm going to leave it there. We've got our three cases, our expected case, our worst case, and our base case scenario, as you can see from the 3 lines here. What you can then do around scenario plans is actually choose which ones you want to submit as part of the next stage. So behind this whole model, you have the idea of workflow, being able to submit it for approval and rejection. In my case, I've simplified it just to be able to choose which ones I want to pass through to the supply team. By default here, we have all 3 scenarios being passed on. But if I say I just want to put forward scenario 1, the expected case, and maybe scenario 2 and scenario 3 I was just treating as kind of sandpit areas for myself and just want to pass scenario 1 onto, I can choose to do that. And then when we move through to the next stage, which is an allocation down to customers, the only scenario that they'll have available here is scenario 1. So they won't even see scenario 2 and scenario 3. They can use the demand forecast that we fed through to them, and perhaps they'll do their own scenarios off the back. So if you imagine a scenario 4 and 5 and 6 that purely relates to this allocation side, that might be what they focus on. Or in my case, because I want the full connected planning process to happen across my 3 scenarios, I'm actually going to submit all 3 through to the supply chain step as well. Looking here, just the final piece before we get into supply chain is the idea of allocating down to customers. Where we had the dimension here, which was the SKUs, we did our demand forecast for units just down to the SKU level, rolling up into products. Here, though, we want to allocate it down to our customers, because when it comes down to the supply side and where we want our goods around the world in different distribution centers, we need to know who we're selling it to. So we could have done the first step and the first dashboard and have customers in there as a dimension, and people would plan their units by a combination of product and customer. But in this case, we're going to do an allocation. So we can take this high level forecast that we've just completed here, and again, by scenario, if I look at scenario 1, this is my demand forecast here for scenario 1, and then we're going to allocate it down to my customers. So here you can see my different customers, a historical factor, so we can use historical data, actuals that have been brought in to drive our split. So you can see that direct website sales, for example, is our largest proportion, and 14% of the plan would be allocated to them, which is what we have here, going all the way down to the bottom here, where we end up with our demand plan by SKU and by customer. Same as before though, if you want to make adjustments to it, you have that option. So if I want to say that actually I expect the website sales, just because of reduced footfall in the high street maybe, instead of being 14%, I expect it to be way up at 25%, for example, we can make these changes. And now my allocation down the bottom here is shifted, and I have a higher proportion of my sales going through the website as an example. Same for telephone, maybe I make that 10% or 15 even, make that 20. And again, you'll see that the allocation now switches and we get a higher proportion of sales coming through direct telephone, and as a result, a total for direct as well. So all data flows, all aggregation up the structures is happening instantly as I change these scenarios. And if I want to, I could do a completely different set of assumptions against my scenario 2. So it's just a slice of data here that I'm looking at. If I say, well, actually in the worst case scenario, I'm going to keep the same proportion, but obviously the demand number is lower. Perhaps in the best case where we had the spike in sales, again, we expect a higher amount to come through our website. And I can say maybe 30% rather than the 14 will come through the website channel instead. Okay. Moving on now to perhaps a different role, so actually moving on to the supply side. If I go to supply planning, again, we're feeding through all 3 scenarios. So where the demand planners have done their expected case, their best case, and their worst case, we have all 3 options that we can plan our supply against. So obviously, firstly, just of interest is to see how different impacts on sales would affect the supply chain. Obviously, more importantly, it means when you start getting more and more actuals in, or things become clearer, and you see that actually the market is trending towards the worst case option, for example, you've already got your plan in place that you can switch to. You're not scrabbling around trying to rework spreadsheets to work out what's happening next. You already have that scenario in place. So in my case, if I start with scenario 1, what we have is things like the opening stock. We've got our planned demand. This is fed through. And now we're looking down to a distribution center level. So we have 4 distributions here at this company. The split in demand came from that allocation and where the customers are based as to where we actually need those products to be. And importantly, this is what we've seen before from the idea of a baseline and those kind of things. Anaplan is making a suggestion for us that all we have to do is amend if we want to. In this case, the baseline is suggesting when we actually need to reorder our quantities to get them into the distribution center in time. You can see here it's suggesting that we do a reorder in week 19. So if I choose to do a reorder, you'll see how it spikes up above my safety stock level. So safety stock here being calculated by SKU. If I keep going through and just choose to agree to the Anaplan way, so basically reordering when it tells me to, you can see it's making sure that I'm keeping my inventory above that safety stock line. Going one step further though, based on when we actually need the orders, based on the default shipping method. So you can see here the default shipping method for this particular product is through a lorry. If we have air, rail, ship, we can actually vary the method as well, which will not only vary how long it takes to get to us, and therefore when we need to raise the purchase order, it may also vary the cost. So for example here, in week 19, obviously this is already actuals, so I need to order this in week 17, but I'm already in week 18, so perhaps it's too late for me to have this come through a lorry. Instead, maybe I choose to make it a delivery through air as well. So now, based on the method I've chosen, I actually only have to raise the purchase order in week 18 instead. But then actually that will flow through to my cash flow, and I've got a higher delivery cost in week 18 because it costs more to transport something by air than it does by lorry, etc. Okay, so if I just go through, I'm not going to plan the whole lot here, but I will go through, I'd make my changes. Importantly, again, if you want to actually override the order quantity, and rather than ordering the Anaplan suggested amount here, if I decide that I want to order more, I can make these changes as well, and then it will just suggest a different time frame for when I need to make my reorders based on that large order that I placed as well. So very responsive, giving you suggestions for when you should actually place your orders rather than you having to work them out as well. Importantly though, and as before, it's doing it across all three scenarios. So this is my expected case, it tells me where I need to raise my purchase orders, how much I should order against scenario 1. If I flip to scenario 2, very easy now for the supplier manager or whoever's filling out this dashboard to do the same thing. So if I go through, choose to do my reorders, I can start to keep the inventory level here above the safety stock level as well. So we actually have 3 concurrent plans all running. As I said before, when we start to see how the data starts to trend, that's when we can start to do our adjustments or to switch into the new scenario for our comparisons. Okay, just gonna take a quick leap over to the question panel. I can't see any questions so far. Just a reminder, if you do have any questions as we go through, if you want to put them into the questions or the chat pane, please feel free to do so as we move through the demonstration. Okay, so that was the demand flowing through into supply. Now let's see how that demand is actually flowing through into the workforce plan as well. So now looking at a different use case, as Adam showed, the idea of the honeycomb using the same Anaplan platform across multiple use cases. Obviously, the more use cases that get built out, the more you get this connected planning story where a change to a demand number will flow all the way through, and in this case has flown through to our workforce plan. So what we're starting with here is that same idea of a total demand. So now we don't care about what the SKU is. We've rolled it up to a total product level, but we're still by distribution center. And if I flip distribution centers, we'll get a different set of demands based on the distribution center that we choose. But here we switched dimensions and we've gone right down to a staff type or a role level. So warehouse operative is what we're going to look at to start with. So again, importantly, just talking about setting up Anaplan, you have complete control around what these hierarchies are, what levels you plan against, and importantly, you can vary those levels based on the data set that you're looking at. So just because you choose to do the demand plan down to SKU level doesn't mean that you have to have SKUs when it comes to doing the workforce plan. It's a different slice of data, you can change your dimensions. Okay, so looking at here, we have that demand plan that's been fed through. We've got our demand in hours. This is simply based off a pick rate in this case. So we're trying to do a driver-based plan to work out what the demand for staff is. Obviously, by making it driver-based, it means that any change in our demand will automatically flow through. And again, we're looking at scenario 1 just to start with. If I come down here, we can see our current supply of labor. It's actually also the green bar here. And we can see the yellow here, which is showing that we have a staffing gap. So effectively what we're saying is in scenario 1 at least, we have this large gap where the demand and the amount of products we're going to have to ship through the warehouse is higher than the supply of staff that we have. We then have a couple of choices to how we meet that. Option 1 is just to rely completely on temporary staff. Option 2 is to actually hire in new people. So if I start, let's wipe out these numbers here for the temp staff that we had already. What I could do if I wanted to just look at the gap that we have. So in this case, it's 127 is our staffing gap. I could just say, well, let's just get 127 hours of temporary labor, and that's filled our gap. 137 hours in week 19 and 124 hours in week 21. So we're filling our gap exactly with temporary staff. But as you can see up here on the financial side, the average hourly cost of a temporary worker is actually higher than if we hired someone. So as long as we feel confident that it's worth hiring someone and keeping them on payroll even during the dips in demand, perhaps that's the better option. So what I'm going to do is just wipe out these. I'm going to start off looking at the planned hires. So if I choose to hire someone in week 18, we can see the impact of that hire. We've still got gaps all the way through the year. So maybe actually I'm going to choose to hire 2 people, and you can see how we're starting to get closer to our demands that we have in hours for scenario 1. If, just as an example, I flip to scenario 2, which was our worst case, and we said we were going to hire those same 2 people, you can see we get to the point where actually in some cases we're exceeding the demand for staff that we had. So we can start to make decisions, say actually if the worst case starts to take effect, do we actually want to hire that second person, or do we want to rely on temporary labor instead? So you can start to make decisions across the scenarios, and again have all these 3 plans running concurrently. If I look at scenario 1 again, we've gone back, we've got our 2 hires, we've filled the gap to a point, but now I can come down and say, well, now let's assume we're going to try and fill the rest of the gap just with temp workers. So we can start to actually do our detailed demand plan. Again, obviously in this case, it's me filling out the numbers across all these sections, but this could be a devolved process where perhaps the manager of the warehouse is looking at his staffing plan, the demand plan gets fed through, and importantly, it gets fed through instantly. So if I go all the way back here, and where we have demand in week 18 of about 41,000, if I go all the way back to my demand forecast here, and in week 18, let me just put in a crazy number here and say that we're going to sell, well, that was 100,000 more units as an example. As I come back down to my workforce plan, you'll see that suddenly we have this huge spike in week 18 and a big gap that we have to fill. So as that demand plan gets updated downstream, that will automatically flow instantly through into my workforce plan. So now I can reforecast, replan, because currently I'm about 500 hours short of meeting that demand plan. So an extreme example, but you get the idea. As these changes get made into different scenarios, or perhaps a scenario 4 gets created, that instantly flows through. You don't need to have spreadsheets flying around the business that need to be filled out. Moving this further down, so this is all the demand side, built in hours and heads, in number of hours of temporary staff as well. What we then have though is a translation into the financial side. So taking simple financial metrics, again based on history, we've got things like the average wage per hour for a warehouse operative in London, average overtime wage per hour, average temp cost per hour. In our example here, where we're doing our scenario plans, we're basically assuming that the demand, the best case, worst case, expected case is our scenarios we're planning. It could be that the warehouse manager wants to do a brand new scenario just to say, actually, what would the impact be if the average wage per hour of a permanent worker went up to 20 euros in this case. So we can immediately see the impact on our financials. It will be different across our scenarios. And you can start to see if a certain point comes where actually the cost of an FTE full-time worker gets too high, maybe temporary staff is the better way to go to fill those gaps. So you can start to do those scenarios as well. Okay, so final step just to talk to is the idea of then how this flows even further through into the financials. So, so far we've seen demand through into supply, through into workforce. We've seen glimpses of financials. So on the workforce side, we have financials here. We have financials against the different shipping methods for air versus lorries, etc., versus ships. And obviously on the demand side, all we need is a price book and maybe information against each customer in terms of rebates and things like that to get to a revenue number. All those metrics then make it possible to flow this through into a full financial FP&A type model as well. In my case, just as an example, if I flip back to the home screen here, I just have a cash flow model off the back. In this case, it's a short-term cash flow, so just the next 13 weeks. Again, it's just showing the idea of Anaplan being used for financial data. So all that data would flow in. We have creditors and debtors. We can start to look at payment terms, maybe by customer. So if you want to go right down to an individual customer, if you know this person normally pays in 30 days or 60 days, you can start to get the timings of your cash flow based on that. Same way for things like shipping and the timing of shipping, that can all flow through. Obviously, things like the the hourly wage workers, do they get paid every week, every month? You just put your timings in, and you can go as detailed as you want. So right down to even the transactional level, I think we have in this case. So picking individual invoices that are due and specifying when you're going to pay them, or far more likely, you do it at a slightly higher level. So just make an assumption in terms of by cost bucket, what's the payment profile? Maybe 60% of it happens within 30 days and 20% is in 60 days, and that would flow through. So all that gives you is a feed straight through into finance. And as changes being made to units sold or the number of hours that you need, you can immediately see that impact across P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow as well. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions. Please do raise them if you want to. Otherwise, I'm going to hand back to Adam just to summarize off with a couple of slides, and if you want to get in contact, some contact details as well.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Let me just change the presentation. And just confirm, Chris, that you've got the slide up there, please.
Yeah, I can see that.
Excellent. So that was really good, Chris. Really appreciate that, and really shows the connected planning, the benefits it can have to the business, and saving a lot of double entry and copy and pasting, definitely. Just while I've got this demonstration slide on, I'll just reiterate, as Chris said, Anaplan is a cloud-based platform. Access it from any browser, but equally it's available to you on your iPad, on your phone, on your so iOS and Android is available as an application as well, which is great for certainly appraising, doing workflow approvals, pulling up key metrics that are important to you whilst you're on the go as well. So all that is available. Just to reiterate some of the pieces that I touched on at the start and Chris has shown during the demonstration as well, is fundamentally we Anaplan saw the challenge in the market that too much time spent on non-value add tasks. So you want your best people applying that knowledge to the right spaces. So this is what we typically saw in an Excel type world, where lots of people collecting data, keeping on top of their spreadsheets, and having very little time for the analysis and making the right business decisions for your organization. So what we see with Anaplan is we take care of the capturing of the data that's pulled from source, it's managed and it's trusted in Anaplan. It's a single point of truth, and then we can now start applying all of those scenarios that you saw Chris doing there, and we're analysing on a very stable, with true integrity on that data set. So now we can start making the right decisions for the business. It gives us the right time in the week to do that, and then we can put those decisions into practice as well, much quicker. And then just moving over, just a couple of other points around customer base. I mentioned at the start that our customer base is wide, and we're agnostic to sectors as well. So Anaplan, we have 1,400 plus customers. They're across multiple categories, and just some of the high level logos you can see there, and as you see, many different sectors, and again in each of those sectors they're using it for lots of different use cases as well. We are industry recognized as well. Feel free to go and have a look at some of the awards that are out there. I'm not going to go through these verbatim, but we are recognized by the leading bodies that you see when you are searching for the right solutions for your business. And then finally, from my end, I really appreciate everyone taking time out to listen to our webinar. I hope it's been informative. I truly hope that that you've seen something that you can see your business in Anaplan. If that is the case, please reach out to us on the details on the screen there. Drop us an email. Delighted to get in touch and take you through how Anaplan could look for your business, the best approach to it, how we deliver projects, a whole host of information is also available on the website as well. So I look forward to hopefully meeting some of you soon, and hopefully getting you started on your Anaplan journey. But thanks to Chris for an excellent demonstration. I wish you all the best for the rest of the week, everyone, and thanks for your time today.